Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Pat and today I am bringing you my February wrap up. I can't believe February is done. At the same time it's like February is done. It has been a month, definitely. We had a snowstorm here in Washington, so I had pretty much a whole week of reading to myself. So for this month, I did read a total of, I think I read like 11 books. Because I did read 11 books. So the first book that I finished for the month of February is A Girl of Nightmares by Kendar Blake. This is the second book in Anna Dressed in Blood duology, and I liked it. It has been a while since I read the first book, and I really loved that book so much. And I thought, we definitely needed a sequel. And it took me a while to read this, and I don't know if it's because it's been a while, but I didn't feel so connected to the characters as much as I did this one. I felt like we didn't really get a lot of Anna from this, and I don't know, I just needed more from her. And the story went into a different place that I'm not saying that it shouldn't go, that it didn't feel like it should have went, but I felt like it was a little bit forced. Like, you can already see what the author is like aiming to do with the story, and you understand why she's trying to aim for that, arc, but I felt like we didn't really get a full end of the previous book for us to have a different arc in this one, or, for me personally to feel comfortable with the arc in this one. So I don't know, I just felt like it's hard to say without spoiling anything, but I still like this book. I rated it 4 out of 5 stars, but I don't know, I wanted it to go a little bit differently than it did. I still enjoyed it, I still liked it. But the next book that I finished for the month of February is Reflection by Elizabeth Lim. And this is part of the Twisted Tales kind of series of books where they're not completely connected. They're just retellings of our favorite Disney princess stories, or, favorite fairy tales. And this is a retelling of Mulan, and I really loved it. I enjoyed it so much. I flew through this book, and I felt like it didn't feel like it was forced. It didn't feel like we didn't really need it. It didn't feel like it took on something that it didn't really meet, it didn't really add on to Mulan's story from, the movies that we've had, and it did. And I felt like this is one part of the story that we definitely needed. Definitely, it is a retelling. Like, it takes off from the part of Mulan saving them from what are they called? I forgot. The enemies. Them. It takes part from that scene in the mountains, in the icy mountains, where Mulan pretty much saved everyone in their troops by firing that one last cannon to the mountain and pretty much burying their enemies alive. It takes off from that, where she is saved by Li Shang, and in turn Li Shang gets a very mortal wound, and because of this she takes on this adventure to save Li Shang, because he doesn't want Li Shang to die. She doesn't want Li Shang to die. So she goes to the underworld to save him, and this was so much fun. I just really loved it. I felt like we delved a little bit more to... Well, we know Mulan is very smart and brave, but I felt like we got more of that, and we got more of Shang too, because we didn't really know who Shang was. Like, yeah, we know he's very noble, and he's also very brave and courageous, but I felt like we need more of Shang, and we got it here. And even of just a beautiful retelling of the underworld mythology in terms of the Chinese mythology, Chinese underworld thing mythology. So I really enjoyed this book. I rated it a 4.5 out of 5 stars. Enjoyed it so much. And the next book that I read is A Thousand Beginnings and Endings, edited by Ellen O and Elsie Chapman. This is a compilation of short stories, anthologies, an anthology from different authors written at the back. There are like 15 authors. Yeah, 15 retellings of Asian myths and legends. So you have different kind of stories that are inspired by, or like retellings of different stories from different cultures. So you have Filipino ones, Chinese, Hmong, Punjabi, Vietnamese, Korean, South Asian, Gujarati. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly. And yeah, I usually don't enjoy anthologies or like short story compilations because usually they feel very rushed and underdeveloped. And that's the thing with the short stories. But I had high hopes for this one, or like I'm saying a little bit more because these are based from actual stories now. So you know, they already have a structure, and I was just very interested in this book retells stories from different cultures with different beliefs and mythology and all that. So I was very interested in that, especially being a Filipino myself. So I really enjoyed this book. I think because there are like already mythologies, or like these are pretty much retellings of mythologies, that's why the stories didn't feel so underdeveloped for me. For the most part, I still have some of my more favorite parts and some that are more usual short stories where they're just not very good. But I still like, compared to maybe like the 4 or 5 that I can remember anthologies that I read, this is like my favorite. So yeah, I rate this a 4 to 5 stars. The next book that I read is Thomas Wildus and the Book of Sorrows. This was sent to me not for review, just, you know, I was just asked if I wanted a copy so I can read the book. So I said yes, and they sent it to me. So, you know, so this is about Thomas Wildus, obviously, and he is searching for magic pretty much because his dad has always told him when he was young that magic is real. So, his dad actually disappears and, you know, presumed dead, obviously, but he always believed in the words of his dad. So he's always been looking for, you know, magic in this world. And then he is given this book, the Book of Sorrows, and it takes him into this really amazing adventure of magic. So I rate it as a 4.5 out of 5 stars. This was so much fun. I'm really interested in learning more about the world because I felt like in this book we didn't really like learn about like the magic system very much. I think it's a very interesting magic system. We just didn't really get into it much. I really loved the relationship between Thomas and his mom because he's 13, and around this age usually kids start growing apart from the parents, especially their moms, and they don't really say I love you or give kisses and all that. But they have this relationship between the two of them, and it's just so beautiful. It's refreshing to see that kind of relationship between parents and, you know, kids at this age especially. So that was just pretty much my favorite part of this book, and I love how they're very trusting and open to each other. I mean, as open as you can be, you know, as parents, but they're still pretty open compared to a lot of relationships I can see in books and, you know, other real life circumstances. So I really enjoyed that about this. The ending did feel a little bit rushed. Like, this is, how many pages is this? This is 345 pages, and I felt like we could have gotten like 20 more pages or 30 more pages for the ending. I felt like, you know, it was a little bit rushed, but I'm very hopeful that the second book is going to be much better and will delve more into the magic system in this book, because the magic system isn't really discussed that much. It was introduced, you were shown what the magic can do, but I felt like how the magic works and what more the magic can do is, you know, not very much explained here. So I'm very excited to see what's going to happen in the next book. So I will be reading the next one. I loved also much of the characters in here. They seem very interesting. They don't feel like they're just accessories to spur the story along or to add like very nostalgic elements that are present to a lot of middle grade books that we grew up loving that are in this realm. So the next book that I read is Everything Everything by Nicola Yoon, and I was very hesitant. I mean, I was very apprehensive when I started reading this because I know that some people like this and some people don't. So I was like, I don't know. Let's see. And I really enjoyed it. This is pretty short, and the chapters are also pretty short. This is only 300 pages. And this is a love story between the main character has this disease. She has this disease that she's pretty much allergic to everything. So she lives isolated inside her house. Her mom and her nurse need to be like disinfected every time they go in and out of the house, and it's a very tedious process. And she never really gets visitors because of the process of that. And she's just very isolated in the world. She never goes outside, and yeah, this is her story. And she gets these new neighbors, and she gets into this relationship between the guy next door, the new guy next door named Ollie, and it's their love story, and I really enjoyed it. I felt like Ollie and the main character, what is her name? Maddie. I felt like, they had a really good connection and they really learned about each other pretty well. I didn't really enjoy like the climax part of the story, and especially how the story ended, and that twist. I felt like the twist came out of nowhere. Like, I understood how the twist came to be, but at the same time I felt like I wish we could have been given like clues, like very, very little clues, where at the end of the book we're like, oh my god, is that why? Because I didn't really get that. I was like, oh, that's messed up, but that makes sense. I wanted that. I wanted the, oh, is that why? Where I didn't really guess it, but I realized that it's there. I wanted that, but I still really enjoyed this book. I haven't watched the movie yet. I will watch it. And yeah, I rated this a 4.5 stars. The next book that I read is part of one of my main reading goals this year, and that is to read at least 1 or 2 classics, and that is, I read Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. This is my personal copy. If you haven't seen my book outlet video, I'll try to link it up here or somewhere down below. I bought this off of Book Outlet so that I can pretty much force myself to read it, or like, motivate myself to read it, knowing that I have like this beautiful, beautiful copy of this book, and I really like this. The thing about classics, especially classics that are set in or written around this era, I can't really get into them because I find that the writing is just a little bit too different from what I'm used to reading. So I don't really get into it. And I remember having like my own copy of this when I was a kid, but I never really understood what it was about. I just knew about Elizabeth Bennet and Mr. Darcy, and she has sisters, and her mom wants her to get married, and how that was before. So I was very, again, apprehensive getting into this because I wasn't sure if I was going to like it, and I did. And I think I felt like because I started this around the time the snowstorm started, so I had like a good time to really make it through the first, 100 pages or like 50-60 pages, where I could just really establish and get used to writing, establish myself and get used to writing. And I felt like I didn't really need it because I was flying through this. There are a lot of chapters, but the chapters are very short, and I felt like that really helped in reading the book, because again, the writing is very different, but I didn't feel like I was so lost. Like, I didn't feel like, what are they talking about? I still really, really enjoyed this, and I loved how self-aware this is. And around that time, women are still viewed as mainly for getting children, and I'm not a big fan of that. And seeing how Mr. Darcy is, I know who Mr. Darcy is. He's a very popular character, and hearing how he's this very cold, aloof, kind of rude guy, I just thought he was gonna be one of those very, like, I don't know, like those tsundere characters that we get that are usual in like a lot of romance novels, or like just romance in general, with the recent contemporary releases that we've had. I thought he was gonna be those, and he's not. He's quite misunderstood, to be honest. He's still that very cold, aloof kind of guy that really added on to the misunderstandings and everything. But I felt like Jane Austen's writing and her world, even though it is set during this time and it really focuses on the marriage, and especially the mother, I didn't really like. Okay, let me just put that out there. I didn't really like their mother. Like, she's okay. I don't hate her, but she's not one of my favorite. Or I wasn't like, okay, she's fine. It's a very smart book, and it's really much more well developed than a lot of romance novels that we see now, especially with the side romances as well. I love how Jane Austen isn't afraid to point out the flaws of each of the characters, and how it adds to the angst, in a way, of the relationship between the characters. I really like that. That's pretty refreshing to see, especially for books that I've read recently. And this is a classic. This is published in the 1800s and set in that era as well. So I just really enjoyed it so much. I rated it a 5 out of 5 stars. I'm now so excited to read more of Jane Austen's works and, get into the other classics that I have. I definitely felt like we needed more of the romance like understood that there was definitely an attraction to them, and there's an intellectual understanding between Lizzie and Mr. Darcy, especially towards the end of the book as they get to know each other. But they get to know each other more in third person, especially in Lizzie's perspective. I felt like she learned more about Darcy from like third party sources. Like it directly affects her, but it's still like third party sources. Like she didn't really directly experience it. So I felt like we needed more of that. If they eventually did get married, although I didn't want them to get married yet, but it was set like a few months after like the last scenes, and I still really liked it. So yeah. The next book that I read is The Kiss Quotient by Ellen Huang. I rated it as a 4 out of 5 stars. I really like this book. This tells the story of Stella Lane, who has Asperger's, and her mom has been wanting her to have a kid, or like, you know, find a husband, a boyfriend that she can stay with or she can be with for a while now. So, but she's not very experienced with romance and dating and all of that. So she hires this male escort to teach her about romance and all that. And of course, that's when they fall in love. And I love how the guy was described as a look-alike of Daniel Henney, who's an American Korean actor who is actually very good looking. So yeah. And I also really like the fact that Stella Lane also likes K-dramas, because same girl. But yeah, I really enjoyed this book. I didn't expect it to be as sexy as it did. I mean, it is a love story between an escort, but I thought it would be less sexy and more getting to know each other. Well, definitely they got to know each other, but it's like really very sexy. A lot more than I expected, but it wasn't bad. I really enjoyed it. I liked it. It was so much fun to read. I flew through this book as well. I will definitely be reading The Bright Test. I think, yeah, I already have it on hold in my library, but I'm like 40 something in line, and they only have like 30 copies that they're gonna have, so it's going to take me probably next month before I can read that one. But yeah, I do want to read that one. I really enjoyed this one too. The next book that I read is The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle by Stuart Church. Now, I've heard a lot of people really like this book, so I have pretty high expectation. I thought I was gonna love it, and I didn't. It was very confusing. I felt like the main issue that I had really with this book is the main character not asking the questions that we pretty much should be asking. We're all asking. Please tell me I'm not alone. Like, this is the story of, you know, the murder of Evelyn Hardcastle, and the main character, Aiden, has to figure out who killed Evelyn Hardcastle, but how he, you know, tries to figure it out is that he wakes up every day in a body of a different host. And it's really interesting because when he's on a different host, he also takes on their personalities and the way they work. So, you know, with every different body that he inhabits, he's thinking differently. He's making different choices than he would have if he had been in another body. And of course, they have different experiences and all that. And I felt that sounded so interesting, and I was like, that was really cool. But I felt like because that is like the main core of the story, that's like the main that's like the main thing, you know, how he's going to discover who killed Evelyn Hardcastle. I thought that we would get more into how it works. Like, how is it that Aiden can do that? Who is Aiden? Why is he the one solving this murder? And who is Evelyn Hardcastle? Why do we need to solve her murder? Why is the murder solved in the way that it is, you know, going to different bodies? And how does that work? Like, is it magic? Is it science? Is it a whole different world? Is that why? We didn't really get that. So I just felt like the character wasn't really asking that. I was just so frustrated. I wanted to love it, but I didn't. We answered them in the last few pages, and I'm just like, that could have given Aiden the motivation to really do this. Like, he does, you know, gain motivation, but it felt like he was just going through the flow and not really asking the questions that he needs to get asked. I mean, I don't know if that's just me, but yeah, I wanted to love this book. I rated it a 3 out of 5 stars. The whole premise is so interesting. The next book that I read, A Very Large Expanse of Sea by Ma Fille. Now, I read the Shatter Me series years ago, and I love that. I actually read Restore Me a few months ago too, so I was very much looking forward to this book because I love the Ma Fille's writing, and I wanted to get, to get more of her writing, because I just remember really, really loving her writing. So I was very excited to read this book. This is a contemporary book about this Muslim girl, Shireen, who's living during this time, like a few years after the 9/11. So people are still very much reeling in the events and how she grows up, and she experienced all of this, racism and violence towards her just because she's a Muslim. And it's in her perspective. And as expected, it was very beautifully written. I rated it as a 4 out of 5 stars. I love the family dynamics, especially her relationship with her brother, and even just their parents. I mean, their parents are her parents. Their parents aren't perfect, obviously, but they have their own beliefs and how they grew up and culture and all that. But I still really love the family dynamics, so I really enjoyed that one about it. Shireen was pretty hard to like in the beginning, but I could understand why. I didn't really hate her. And honestly, I could understand why people would dislike her, especially in the beginning, because she's really portrayed as this very intimidating girl. And she was. She has a very strong presence, and she can be very intimidating. And I loved how one part of the story, her friends actually told her, yeah, you're intimidating, you're pretty scary, and you're intense. And she was like, what? What do you mean? And I really like how the friends, the closest friends that she's had, told her that, and she was like, am I? And I love how honest they were with her in just telling her what they'd view her, especially in the beginning. I've heard a lot of very mixed reviews about this, and I could understand why. But I still really love this book. I still really do. This writing is beautiful. The characters aren't perfect. I know Ocean, the love interest, is pretty perfect. He's perfect pretty much. But I like how, because he's so different from Shireen, he introduces her to this whole other way of thinking and this whole other perspective. And where she's coming from, especially with her experiences. But at the end of the day, it's gonna be up to her to decide how she's going to move and react to the world and just live her life. And she realized that, and I really, really like that about this book. Yeah, along with the 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle, I read Love and Misadventures. So I was reading that. I was also reading this one, and this is a poetry collection by Lang Leave, and I rated it as a 5 out of 5 stars. I really love this. I love poetry, and I can't believe this is probably my first poem book. I think, I don't know, but I think this is my first poem book, and I don't know why I haven't read anything poetry, because I love poems and prose. So I really enjoyed this book. So heartwarming, but also heartbreaking. I just loved it. I will definitely be checking out more of her books and more other poetry and prose books. I need to get into these because I love poems and prose. The last book that I finished for this month is A Winter's Promise by Crystal Davos. I wanted to love this book. I rated it as a 3 out of 5 stars. I was so actually all of the characters are very unlikable. Even the main character. The other characters, but she's also pretty, I don't know, pretty naive and very stuck in her own way of thinking. I wanted to love this. Okay, I heard so many good things about this, and I heard a lot of people love it, and I don't know, I just felt like it was so underdeveloped. We could have gotten a lot more from this world that we didn't really get, and we're following, and this is okay, so this is about Ophelia who lives, this is fantasy, okay, so, and the people here are very tight-knit community. So if you live in one community, you're very tight-knit, and if you live in another, they're very tight-knit. You don't really intermingle. And the thing with this is that Ophelia gets betrothed to pretty much a guy from the other end of the world. So she goes and moves to that world, and it's a very different culture from her own, where her culture is very collective. They're very community-ish culture. They're all pretty much related. They consider each other cousins, even though they're pretty far cousins. They would probably not be related at all. But that's the thing about this whole world. They have this main ancestor where all of them came from. But usually they don't really intermingle. They don't marry outside of their own country, pretty much. And she gets betrothed to this guy from this very different country and very different cultures, where if they're very collective, her family is very collective, his family is very violent, brutal, and very different. Just there's a lot of killing and dying happening. So this is I thought this was gonna be their love story. I was very excited to see that because between, especially in the beginning, their descriptions, Ophelia is very small and tiny, and Thorne's like this really big and like scary looking guy. And I thought that I don't know. I just find those kinds of pairings cute. Okay, so I thought we would be getting a lot more of, you know, their romance and how Ophelia is gonna move through Thorne's world and what she's going to learn from his world, especially seeing how she's so meek and shy and just very, you know, very small and innocent and naive, and going to this world that's so different from her world. I thought she was going to be learning a lot, and definitely she learned a lot, but I felt like she gets very isolated still, that this is a very dangerous world that she's getting into, and I felt like she was too protected. I mean, she still had this like really crazy encounters, but still, like, prepare the girl. You know, this is something that never happens, like the intermarriage of all that, like marriage from other, you know, countries. It doesn't happen. The least you can do is like prepare the girl who's, you know, is going to have a hard time. So yeah, that's one of the things. And another is the romance. I didn't like the romance at all. I feel like we didn't really get a lot of romance, and then I don't know, it just happened, and I wouldn't love it. I was so frustrated. I wanted to learn more about the world, like how the world came to be, because there were hints of how the world wasn't really like this before, and then something happened, and now it's like separated in different continents and all of that. And I wanted to learn about that, especially the magic too. We didn't really get to see like the magic system in this world, because I felt like with different continents, they have different kinds of powers within their own society, and it's very different from, you know, other society. So I wanted to learn more about that, and we did not get any of that at all. So the world building was just not there. The characters were very unlikable. The romance, where you think it would be okay, the romance is pretty good, you know, you can pretty much overlook the fact that there's no world building, and you would expect to get into the next book because you're interested to see where the story goes. Because of the love story, no, because the love story isn't very good either. So I don't know. There's like a 90% chance I won't be reading the next book. So yeah, that was very disappointing. I wanted to love this book, especially since like this is 400 pages. So I wanted to get a lot more of it. Ophelia's adventure in the middle of the book is very interesting, and that was very fun to read, and I really like that part. But everything else is just like, I wanted to love you. I was so disappointed. So those are all of the 11 books that I read for this month. I did read quite a lot more than I usually would expect, especially since it's such a short month, but the Storm really gave me a lot of time to read. Tell me what do you guys think of my opinions, if you agree with them, if you also read the book, and what do you think about the books that I read, if you like them, dislike them, agree with me, disagree with me, if there's anything else you want to tell me, if you think I should continue with The Winter's Promise. I don't know if you guys read the sequel. Does it get better? Does it actually get very, very, very much better? Does it get much better? Tell me, because then I will be reading the sequel. But if not, I don't want to waste my time, because I think those are all pretty thick books, like the whole quartet. Is it a quartet? I think it's more of a quartet trilogy. I don't know, but yeah. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you on my next one. Bye.